Hey there, quick video on dealing with the North Island Refinery kit from Walthers in N scale. So, in the instructions, the first thing you do is assemble a couple of small assemblies. This tower smokestack assembly or something like that. So I've gone ahead and glued together a couple of the parts for it. 5 and 6 and 4 and 4. There's not a lot of rhyme or reason to their numbering in the kit. You'll see that the opposing sides for this tube are 5 and 6, but then the opposing sides for the lower part of it are both 4. They probably should decide which way they're going to go and have it be 5, 6, and then 7, 8, and all that, but they don't. You just got to kind of work your way through it. So I haven't attached 3 and 2. I haven't dealt with those yet. I'm working on these over here because there's a lot of them. There are all these little pipe assemblies. And one problem with them is that they don't actually line up very well. When you put them together after you've taken them off the sprue, the little points, there's a little raised part and there's a little pocket, and they go together. And when they go together, everything's slightly offset because those little points aren't quite right. The model isn't quite right. Something went wrong in the CAD 3D model for the injection mold or something. Or it's just an old mold, or I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, but they don't match up. I don't like that. And there's an easier way to go about this anyway because of the shape of this thing and the features it has with these points on it and being round. So what I'm doing is just going ahead and slicing off those points because these surfaces where they're supposed to be made up aren't all that smooth either. There's a lot of flash and sprue, as they call it, like bits that aren't supposed to be on the model that are on it. Stuff that stands up and gets in the way. So take one and clear off those little raised up nubs, registration points. I'm thinking of them as is why I'm calling them points. What's the term for those? Pegs and holes, I guess, in carpentry. So anyway, those off, then I smooth off this surface so that they go together nicely without any seams showing. Because once I prime them, if there aren't any seams and they glue together well, they'll be nice. But if there is a seam, the primer will dip down into it and it'll just look weird. That'd be good. So just with a semi-rough file, it's one of the rougher of the microfiles I have, which are not very rough. Clean off the surfaces to make sure everything's smooth. And then like that, it mates up nicely, and the edges of these pillars go together well and they look right. So to make it all hold together in the right position, just use a rubber band and double it over the ends. Okay, so I'm not sure what was out of the frame, what was in frame, but take the two parts, cut the little tabs off that are supposed to line it but don't, do a really crappy job of it. Plane off the inner surfaces, put a rubber band on it, as shown, overlap method, around these posts and around this side in the middle, and it holds it together. 3 points, holds it together fairly nicely and aligned. Better than the built-in little registration points that don't work. This gives you a better surface to work with than that, so I recommend it. Especially to this top that I want to be smooth, and then I'll prime it, and then I'll just only really worry about this top being smooth, and I will sand it with like 600 to 600 to 1500 grit sandpaper to smooth that prime on the top to make it look nice and rounded, and then give it whatever color it's supposed to have, or just weather the prime with India ink or something because it's oil refinery. And white primer with India ink weathering might look like insulation over piping with dirt and grime on it. We'll see. And so now I can just glue it together like that. I think the glue I was using is probably dried out. No, it's still goopy, and I can... no, I don't really want to use that because I want it to be really fluid and flow into the gaps that I'm going to make. I'll set up the gaps first and show you how that goes. So you take a pin, like I have these T-pins. Any pin will do. You could use a narrower pin than this. But this is what I have right at the table and feel like using. So I got to make a wedge. I don't want to mess up the surface too bad, but this is on the bottom and it doesn't really matter. Any primer will cover any little nick in the edge that I make, because I poke this pin in between the parts. I could have put this in there before I wrapped it up, but I didn't. So just poke it in there like that. Cool, no harm, no foul. There's just going to be a tiny little nick on the edge from that. But it separates the two enough, then it goes through the next side easily. And I don't want to rip the rubber band, so I'll try and get it in between them. There we go. Now I got this wedged apart and I can get glue in there, and then I can pull the pin out and it just is popped back together and the rubber band holds it in the right spot and we're good to go. So I'm going to get some more of this Gorilla Glue, kind of super gluey, kind of quick bonding stuff going. It stinks a bit, so try and keep it closed. Use a toothpick to just slide this over so I can separate these pillars, because that's the main thing that I want to have glued together. Kind of nicey nice instead of lamey lame. Tiny bit of glue on the inside surface of there is all I need. Don't need a lot. And then I'm going to put a little glue right there. And right there. And then I move this over to the other side so that I can get in between the support pillars on this side and glue these together. Because after priming I want these to look like one part without a seam, because there's supposed to be one part without a seam. There should even be a detail on this of a kind of a collar around both pipes where those go up and have a support column, like, because they don't make pipes in these sections with like a support coming out of it that's like the same material as the pipe, like all cast it was once. It's not very well detailed in that, given they're making you assemble them like this. Like, it could just be one big chunk of cheap plastic, like it comes as a toy or something, that's just, you know, making you assemble these would make sense if there's a bunch of fine detail that required injection molding in two halves, but there aren't. These could be like all one part kind of thing. Yeah, I went to school for industrial design and included theory on manufacturing, design for manufacturing, and design for assembly, and design for disassembly, and user-based design, and the user is a model builder in this case. And in this case it seems like it's almost make work tedium, because, oh, it's a model builder, they like it to be difficult, but there's no payoff for it here. The model builder wants to do the model building because there's a payoff in a fine detail structure that you can't get without that. But on these, I'm not really seeing it. So anyway, yeah, I'm getting glue on my fingers because it's in there and it's on there, and I just kind of push it down so the ends are flush. And the rubber bands hold it together, and I'm good to go. That's done. I did another one. I've got a whole bunch more to do because this thing, I can see why others are like, ah, this kit is kind of lame, because like things like this, for the amount of detail on these, the amount of work you got to do is just not really there. Like, what I'm saying is that this should have a collar going around that like makes sense, that like there was a structure and they wrapped a two-part collar around the pipe that then legs fit on or something, or it should be actually pipes with two supports on either side. That actually makes a lot more sense, two supports on either side with a cross member that the pipe is resting on. Just this, I'm not even sure you see that in real life, like you know, there's something definitely missing there, unless this is supposed to be insulation around a smaller pipe that's totally masking any type of structure that these pillars are coming out of. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. It should be probably on either side, or at least with a collar around it, that then these were